Cyberpunk 2077? Let's talk about it. Welcome to another episode of Bethany Talks About Stuff. I'm your host, Bethany F. DeVores, author of the Sea Addressing Chronicles, available from Amazon. And today I'm talking about the video game that is Cyberpunk 2077. And this is also obviously in honor of the dystopian, futuristic game that is Cyberpunk 2077. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the game. Then I'm going to give you some pros and cons and give you some overall notes. I want to give you enough information to decide whether or not you want to play it if you haven't played it, and get your take on this game if you have. So let's start off by describing this game. So Cyberpunk 2077 is a game by CD Projekt Red, which is the same company that did the Witcher games, which is what, from my understanding, what most people know CDPR for. And Witcher 3, as you guys probably already know, is one of my all-time favorite games. I love that game. I have played it through so many times. Cyberpunk 2077 has been in the works for, I think, at least a decade. Like, it's been out there for a long, long time in the works. It was even teased a little bit. In my opinion, it sounded like a little bit of a tease from Ciri in Witcher 3, which talks about one of the other worlds that she went to. So it's been coming a long time. So you probably know about some of the trials and tribulations they've had with their release, and we'll talk about that. But first, let me tell you a little bit more about the game. So it's an open world role-playing game, or RPG. It's set in kind of a dystopian, future-like alternate universe, and it's set in a place called Night City, which is in California. The dynamics of the country are way different in this kind of dystopian future. And Night City is really its own thing. You know, it's a big, big city and everybody wants to make it there. This is based on a tabletop game called Cyberpunk by Mike Pondsmith from 1988. Quickly, to give you a synopsis of the basic plot line, the player is playing a character named V, and it can be a male or a female V. But V can have 3 life paths. They can either start off as a nomad, a street kid, or a corpo. Which nomad is somebody who lives like outside of Night City. Street kid is somebody who's raised in Night City, and a corpo is somebody who's worked for one of these corporations, which kind of rule everything. And no matter which one of those life paths you choose, the game starts off differently for each life path. And whichever one of these you choose, regardless, you're going to meet Jackie Wells, and your character becomes friends with Jackie Wells. They become partners in crime, and V becomes a mercenary regardless. And they do mercenary work. It's really interesting. They're really fun together. Jackie Wells is a great character, by the way. Unfortunately, though, we don't get to play with Jackie Wells very long. In what's considered the prologue or opening to the game, Jackie and V steal technology from one of the biggest corporations, Arasaka. And during that process, Jackie is killed. And V takes that piece of technology, which is a chip that has an engram on it, which is like basically a person's soul that's been digitized. And he slots it into his port, because everybody's got a port that they use to gain information and run programs and stuff. So he jacks that into his port, and it ends up having the engram of a character named Johnny Silverhand, who is played by Keanu Reeves, who was basically a terrorist, and he's not happy about this situation. So the chip is actually killing the main character V. So the basic overall quest of the game is that V is trying to save his own life, find a way to remove the chip because it cannot just be removed, and to get himself separated from Johnny Silverhand. So that's the basic idea. There are basically 5 endings available for this game. I won't get into them too much. I will say I wasn't super happy with any of them. And I think that's been a complaint for a lot of gamers, is that while some endings are better than others, there's an overall ending that most people were not happy with, myself included. And I'm hoping that one of the DLCs will add more color to that, give us an alternate ending, allow us to do something different, or continue on with a brighter hope. Let's just put it that way. I really don't want to spoil it too much. So what I want to do now is give you all of my cons first, and then I'm going to give you my pros. I don't know what's considered normal to do your pros or cons first, but in this case, I want to do the cons first, and just get them right out of the way. And then I want to talk about the pros. So before we even get into all that though, I'm going to tell you overall, I really like this game. And so I want to talk about that horrendous launch. Cyberpunk 2077 was released for PC, PS4, Stadia, and the Xbox One December of 2020. And then for the PS5, Xbox Series X or S, it was released in February of 2022. So it was crazy. They had a disastrous release. It was really bad. First of all, the game had been pushed back, I think 3 or 4 times. And the last time they pushed the game back, people lost their minds, which I had wanted to do a video on this and I just hadn't been able to. But people lost their minds in a way that was unbelievably unreasonable. I mean, people need to not be crazy, right? At the end of the day, regardless of how you feel about a video game, I love video games. It's still just a video game. The developers actually got death threats with that last delay. So, having said that, I get that the powers that be at CD Projekt Red got really antsy and they pushed the game out when it really was not ready. It was not ready. It was basically not playable on some platforms, and it was bad. It was super buggy. It crashed all the time. Stuff didn't work. I mean, it was just really bad. And then if people were mad about the delayed launch, then people were really out of their minds over the fact that they paid like $100 for this game and it didn't work. And to me, it seems like, I mean, I've been on enough work projects, particularly technical related ones. I've been on enough of those to know, I feel like somebody in management who did not really know what was going on just said, we'll just push it out there. I mean, and why this really bothers me is not only because it actually is a good game. So a bad release really has done a disservice to a very good game. But all the developers that worked so hard on that game, had to watch their game be dragged through the mud. And some of that was absolutely deserved. I mean, the game was not ready for release. People paid a lot of money and it didn't work. And I understand why people were really frustrated. That was bad. I mean, CD Projekt Red made a mistake. The next gen release came out in February. And CD Projekt Red did do something smart here. In February, they dropped the price. They released demos and they dropped the price. And when I saw that Cyberpunk 2077 was on sale for $29.99, I actually had to double check. I thought it was maybe just a truncated version or something. But no, that was the actual game. So I'm like, you know what? For $30, I'm going to give it a try. Especially now that I know there have been a couple patches pushed out. So it's probably way better. And that was a good choice on my part because I really liked the game. And I really do like the game. I'm still playing it. And I bought it like a week before I started getting really sick and then I got bronchitis. So I put in a lot of time with this game, mainly because I was too sick to do anything else but play video games.
your stuff.
But I was still enjoying it, so I complained. So having said all that, there's your background to the game. Now let's talk about pros and cons. I want to start with the cons. Like I said, maybe not the norm, but I'm going to do it anyway. So one of the things that really struck me, and I am somebody who, even though I'm conservative and a Christian, language tends to not bother me too much. Like, I don't, sorry. It's just coming out there. Language tends to not bother me too much. I just kind of roll with the punches. But when somebody asked me if I thought they would like the game, I said, well, do you like the F-bomb? Because you got to get really comfortable with the F-bomb. I mean, in my opinion, it's actually too much. And that's saying something. You can ask people who know me in real life, like having the F-bomb in movies and games. Actually doesn't normally bother me too much. But it's too much. It's just too much. It's just too much. I also, whereas the F-bomb and other cuss words, don't typically bother me too much because I feel like a lot of that is societal. What I really do hate though is when they use God's name, or if somebody uses God's name as a curse word in and of itself, and then when it's also manipulated to have societal curse words mixed in. And that has become a thing lately. I've noticed on the internet and just everywhere. It's like a common thing. And I don't think it's funny. That is something I find very disrespectful to my faith. And I don't like it. And if that makes me sound prudish, oh well. I am who I am. So it may not bother you. It bothers me a lot. And I didn't appreciate that. So that was a con for me. Also, I love building relationships in RPGs, particularly romantic relationships. I write romance, y'all. Obviously, I like that stuff. But the sex scenes were first kind of awkward. And secondly, not skippable. So in A Witcher 3, you could choose the romantic option, but then if there was a sex scene, you could skip it. Like the sex scene would cut to that and you could just skip it. You can't do that in Cyberpunk 2077. And if you don't choose those, then the romance doesn't flourish. And so I didn't like that because I would have preferred to skip those. And some of them were even more awkward than others. And I'm like, I don't need this. This is a hard M game, you guys. It's hard. Do not let your kids play this game. Period. Do not let your kids play this game. I don't care how mature. And I've taken hate from people about this before, but I'm not going to back down on this. Do not let your kids play games like this. When you are an adult and you can put perspective on a game like this, fine. I am 46 years old. I can handle it. A 5-year-old cannot. A 10-year-old cannot. Don't let kids be kids, okay? This stuff is too rough. It's too rough. They're explicit. The graphic violence is very graphic. Now, I didn't list that as a con because, again, that doesn't really bother me. But I'm 46 years old and I can put perspective on this stuff. It's not going to traumatize me to see it. I can put perspective on that's a game and those aren't real people and, you know. But, sorry, just a little mini rant mixed in there. And again, I realize that I don't have the same view as some of the people who might watch my show. And that's fine. We can agree to disagree. But I feel how I feel. There's a lot in this game about prostitution and the sex industry, and it's very normalized in this game. But in fairness, I feel like they're kind of making a point that this isn't necessarily good, that it's normalized in this particular society. In fact, there's a lot of heartache that comes from how prevalent that tends to be. And that's fine, except that then there are also a lot of very graphic advertisements within the game. Like you just drive down the road and there's stuff like just along the road that you can't really avoid. That's very, for lack of a better adjective, porny. Like this game has a nudity filter. So you can have nudity in this game. But there is a nudity filter, which I use. But I still think you see too much in these ads. It's just was just too much for me. It was just too much. I didn't like that. I still don't like it. And it, frankly, between the F-bombs and the really graphic videos or ads, I had trouble getting gameplay recorded for this. And in fact, I'm still going to have to put some in that I'm not 100% comfortable sharing, because there's just not much that doesn't have one of those ads and 5,000 F-bombs. So those were some cons for me. I will say, I think a lot of people had problems with the endings, which I kind of mentioned already. That despite everything you do, there's still one overarching thing that happens in all the endings that I think everybody was unhappy with. It kind of felt like it undid all the effort that you put into the entire game. Now, I've seen some people say, well, it kind of had to end that way. And I'm like, well, no, it didn't. As a writer, I'm telling you, it did not. Write whatever you want. It doesn't have to end that way. But I've had that feedback as well. I mean, characters do die in my books, and I've had one person tell me she is still years later mad at me about a character's death in the first book. So, not above it. But in this case, I think there could have been at least one ending that didn't end that way, if that makes sense. So that was one of my cons too. There also, one of my issues was with the driving mechanics. I mean, look, I'm not a great driver in any video game, but these driving mechanics were particularly hard. And I've seen other gamers complain about this, like on Reddit and stuff, where they're like, they don't normally have trouble driving stuff in games. And even they were like, these driving mechanics kind of suck. It's hard to control the cars. I actually got to the point that once I had a motorcycle, I only drove the motorcycle unless I had no other choice, because it was a little easier for me to control. I ran over a lot of people, y'all. Ran over a lot of people. Traffic signs, lights. Just ran people off the road, even if I didn't run them over. The driving mechanics were difficult. Again, overall, I really liked the game. So let me talk about some of my pros, some of the things I really liked. I liked that there was a lot of customization, although sometimes that made it really hard to create a character. But it was one of the things I liked about Skyrim too. Like, you could really get in there and do a lot. Skyrim actually did have more customization, but Cyberpunk 2077 is pretty darn good. In fact, when I was customizing my characters, sometimes I would actually have I would use my phone that has like a phone that has a stylus, and I could write, and I would actually write, okay, hairstyle number 10. I like that one. Oh, I also kind of like 15 and 28, and then I would go back to those numbers and pick out whichever one I liked. So there was a lot of customization. There is a nudity filter, which I appreciate. The characters are really interesting. Like, overall, I really liked the characters. I liked V a lot. The main character is somebody I just liked them, and I liked playing V as both a male and a female. And I liked the differences. I enjoyed the relationship between V and Johnny Silverhand, played by Keanu Reeves. At first, I was like, I don't think I'm gonna like this game because his character is such a jerk. But as the game progresses, their relationship changes and it grows. And I loved that. Like, I really enjoyed that. The story is very compelling. There are a lot of really fun gigs to do, side quests. But just even the main story it was very interesting. It was compelling, and it was, to me, gripping. And so I really liked that. I liked going with V on this quest to save V's life while still growing and learning, and the character development of V, depending on what you chose and how you played him or her, was it was really fun and interesting to watch. The gameplay overall, although I don't like the driving mechanics, I enjoyed the other gameplay. There's a lot of stuff you can do. You can kind of go for a netrunner kind of build for your character, in which you are able to do all of this stuff with your cyberware, and you can like short circuit people from a distance or set them on fire, frankly, which sadly I really enjoy. Or else you can go for like a real gun runner kind of thing, where you really build up your gun effectiveness and all of that. So there are options like that that are really interesting. I really liked being able to pick how you want to go at it. I'm going to tell you, I've also had to really learn how to be more stealthy in my gameplay, which is something I'm not used to. And if you've watched any of my other videos about games, you know I'm like, I suck at stealth. This game will make you. There are some that you absolutely fail the quest if you don't do it, but I found that gameplay to be surprisingly still satisfying. So it's really fun gameplay. I really enjoyed the romances overall, though. I liked particularly, and there are reasons that are probably obvious for it, but I particularly liked the romance between female V and River. River was a great character, and he's a cop, and you help him solve two different mysteries. And the second one is very close to home as you're trying to help find his nephew who's been kidnapped. And then that flourishes into romance. It's really good. Like those quests, even without the romance, were very good. They were very enjoyable. So overall, all that said, overall, I really liked the game. I think it's actually worth the price, the full price, with the patches. Would I pay for some DLCs? Yes, actually. I would, because I think anything we can add to that game for additional gameplay, because the gameplay is very satisfying, I would pay for it. So I would prefer to get it for free, but I'd prefer to get almost anything for free. I mean, come on. Basically, there's my review of Cyberpunk 2077. I went on a little longer than I meant to, but it's a very big game. It's a very big map, and there's a lot to talk about. So I hope that you enjoyed this. I'm really interested to see your comments. Have you played it? And if you have, what did you think? If you haven't played it, do you feel like that maybe you will now that you've watched this video? Or you're just like, no, I still don't think that's going to be for me. I'm interested to hear that and what you think about that launch. Please leave a comment, like, share, subscribe, tell your friends. And if you like this content, make sure you check out some of my other videos and subscribe so that you get notifications when I post new videos. And thanks for sticking around. Enjoy some additional goofy gameplay, but otherwise, that's it for now.
Bum bum be dum bum bum be dum bum.